Hey, welcome to Valor and Hope, where we cut through the noise and dig into the facts. I'm Greg, an Iraq war veteran committed to progressive change. It's time to stand up, speak out, and take action for the future we deserve. Let's make that happen together. And if you can't tell, I'm sick today, so please ignore any difference in my voice throughout this video. In this video, I'll be discussing the national security fiasco that's been dubbed Signalgate and why it's a big deal. For those who aren't familiar, this is the jaw-dropping story of how top US officials accidentally leaked classified military plans in a signal messaging group. Not once, but twice. I'll compare this to past controversies like Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago documents and Hillary Clinton's emails so we can expose some glaring double standards in how we handle classified material. It all started in mid-March 2025. Picture a high-level group chat on the encrypted app Signal, titled something like the Houthi PC Small Group. In this chat were the heavyweights of US national security: VP J.D. Vance, SecDef Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the directors of the CIA and National Intelligence, and some White House officials. They were urgently coordinating imminent US airstrikes against Houthi forces in Yemen, who had been attacking ships in the Red Sea amid the fallout of the Gaza war ceasefire. But there was one participant in this chat who absolutely didn't belong there: Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine. Goldberg, he's not a government official, he's a journalist. And yet, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added him to the group. How does one accidentally invite a prominent reporter into a secret war planning chat? Well, according to a Pentagon investigation, Waltz had saved Goldberg's number, a staffer's name, NSC spokesman Brian Hughes. So, when he tried to add this spokesman, he inadvertently added Goldberg instead. In other words, a simple mistake led to an uncleared person being added into a secret or top secret group chat. Inside the Signal chat, the officials were discussing highly sensitive military plans in real time. On March 15th, just hours before a strike on Yemen was set to begin, SecDef Pete Hegseth messaged the group with detailed operational information: the intended targets, types of aircraft and missiles to be used, and the exact launch and attack timelines. This is the kind of information that would normally be classified. Sharing it could tip off adversaries and endanger US forces. In fact, CIA Director Ratcliffe even dropped the name of an undercover CIA officer during the chat. And for good measure, VP Vance and Hegseth used the chat to vent their frustrations about US allies. One such message from Vance sneered, "I just hate bailing out Europe again," revealing contempt for our European partners. Goldberg, sitting invisibly in this Signal thread, couldn't believe what he was seeing. As a journalist instead of a hostile actor, he took the responsible route. He documented everything, and refrained from alerting the group to his presence until he could report the story safely. On March 24, 2025, Goldberg went public in The Atlantic, publishing a bombshell report with a partially redacted transcript of the Signal chat. He described what he witnessed as a shockingly reckless use of an insecure chat app for war plans. The published excerpts omitted the most sensitive details. Goldberg refrained from posting the actual targets or attack times. But the fact the leak happened was out in the open. The initial White House response was a mix of confirmation and defensiveness. The National Security Council spokesman Brian Hughes verified the chat was authentic. In other words, yes, this really happened. It wasn't a hoax or misinformation. But the Trump administration officials immediately downplayed the severity. They insisted that Goldberg was exaggerating the danger and that the redacted parts of the chat weren't actually classified material. In fact, Defense Secretary Hegseth himself went on Fox News to push back. He said, "No one is texting war plans. What was shared over Signal was informal, unclassified coordination for media coordination and other things." Let's pause here. Hegseth is claiming that these messages about airstrike timing and weapons were just harmless logistical talk. As someone who's worked in command and control, I find that claim extremely dubious. And I'm not alone. Military law experts outright rejected Hegseth's defense. Retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Mick Wagoner, a veteran military lawyer, said, 2 hours before airstrikes hit in Yemen, the details are almost certainly classified. You don't announce an attack in advance over a chat and pretend it's unclassified. As Wagoner put it, no way, no how would an upcoming American military operation not be classified. The element of surprise is a fundamental tenet of military strategy. If those plans leak to the enemy, lives could be lost. President Trump himself claimed ignorance, which probably wasn't hard to do given reporting that he needs intelligence briefs to be distilled down to one page with pictures. He told reporters that he didn't know anything about it and took a shot at The Atlantic, saying he's not a big fan of them. Privately, there was reportedly chaos and fury at the Pentagon. One former Pentagon spokesperson, John Uliat, described the situation as a full-blown meltdown internally. But publicly, Trump stood by his team. A White House spokeswoman stated that Trump had the utmost confidence in Waltz and the national security staff. There was no immediate move to fire or suspend anyone after the first leak. Instead, the administration seemed to bet they could ride out the embarrassment by insisting nothing truly sensitive had been exposed. Meanwhile, Goldberg's story set off alarms in Congress. Both Democrats and some Republicans were stunned that a breach could happen like this. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, a Republican, said they would run it to the ground and figure out what went on, indicating bipartisan concern. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren blasted the use of Signal for war plans as blatantly illegal and dangerous beyond belief. And Senator Chris Coons went even further. He stated on Twitter that every single one of the government officials on this text chain have now committed a crime, even if accidentally, that would normally involve a jail sentence. That's a remarkable statement, a U.S. Senator essentially saying the National Security Advisor, Defense Secretary, Vice President, etc. all violated the law and could be worthy of prison. If you're thinking, wow, this is unprecedented, well, you're not wrong. In my time in the Air Force, I never saw anything quite like this. Accidental leaks of classified information have happened before, but typically at lower levels, and usually not via an unauthorized encrypted chat with half the cabinet. In fact, intelligence veterans said they'd never seen a breach like this. Signalgate was already one for the books, and incredibly, it was about to get worse. Just as the administration was grappling with the fallout from the first leak, well, a second leak came into light in April 2025. And in some ways, it's even more troubling. It shows this isn't a one-off fluke. Instead, it's a pattern of reckless behavior. Here's what we learned. At the same time Pete Hegseth was dropping war plans into the Signal chat group that Goldberg witnessed, well, he was also sharing those details in a separate Signal chat. This Signal chat, though, wasn't full of top officials. It was a private chat that included his wife Jennifer, his brother, and his personal lawyer. In other words, the SecDef copied sensitive, classified military information from one chat and pasted it into another chat with people who had no security clearances and no need to know. So let that sink in. The SecDef was knowingly disseminating classified attack details to unauthorized civilians on an informal group chat. If the first leak could be categorized as an accident caused by adding the wrong person, well, the second leak was something else entirely. Because in the first chat, everyone believed they were speaking to people that had clearances. But in the second chat, Hegseth knowingly gave classified information to people with no clearances. That sort of willful dissemination can be prosecuted by the Department of Justice. In plain terms, the first chat was a monumental screw-up. The second was potentially a crime. News of the second Signal chat broke via the New York Times in mid-April 2025. It led to immediate outrage and renewed calls for accountability. Pentagon officials reportedly had a meltdown upon learning that Hegseth had a friends and family war room on his phone. If you recall, Hegseth had gone on TV denying anyone was texting war plans. Well, that defense evaporated when evidence showed he literally texted war plans to his wife and buddies. Hegseth again tried to mitigate the damage. On April 22nd, he appeared on Fox and Friends, and he stuck to his talking points. He said, if you remember, I said no one is texting war plans. What was said then and now was informal, unclassified coordination for the media. But this rang even more hollow now. As NPR reported, the details Hegseth shared 2 hours before airstrikes hit Yemen was almost certainly classified. By sharing it with his wife, brother, and lawyer on Signal, Hegseth implicitly confirmed he knew it was sensitive. Otherwise, why use an encrypted app at all? So he simply assumed the rules don't apply to him. Reports emerged that the White House was quietly looking to replace Hegseth to contain the scandal. Meanwhile, Congress continued to probe. Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat, publicly called for an investigation into Hegseth's Signal chats. Senator Chuck Schumer said this was one of the most stunning breaches of military intelligence seen in a long time. I'd like to add here that if a Democratic Secretary of Defense had done this, there'd be an absolute uproar among Republicans in Congress. The White House response to the second leak was to maintain that no classified information was actually shared. A White House spokesperson insisted that Hegseth's messages, while inappropriate, didn't truly reveal anything secret. However, this is directly contradicted by what independent experts and journalists saw. The Atlantic had, by then, published the entire unredacted transcript of the first Signal chat after officials tried to claim the redactions were hiding innocuous content. The full transcript clearly showed references to specific weapon systems and timing, information that would absolutely be classified. As investigative reporters dug further, they found that Waltz's NSC team regularly relied on group chats to coordinate official work. If Signal was being used as a convenient workaround for formal channels, well, that raises serious concerns. Were these chats being archived for records preservation? Probably not, which might violate federal records laws. It looks like officials were prioritizing speed over proper security protocol, which paints a picture of an administration that was either ignorant of or indifferent to basic security practices from top down. Now, before we judge too harshly, we have to ask, is this really worse than what others have done, or is it being politicized? To answer that, we need to take a step back and compare Signalgate to a couple of prior scandals involving mishandled classified information. And in doing so, we're going to see a pattern, one that says a lot about double standards in Washington. Before Signalgate came about, the big classified document scandal on my mind was Donald Trump's alleged mishandling of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. You might remember the almost comical images that emerged in 2023. Boxes of White House records stacked next to a toilet and a shower at Trump's Florida resort. This wasn't fiction. It came straight from the Justice Department's indictment, which included pictures of dozens of boxes of classified documents stored in a Mar-a-Lago bathroom. Some boxes were also in a ballroom stage and storage room accessible from a pool patio. Basically, highly sensitive documents were kept in less secure conditions than most people keep their tax records. So why bring this up? Well, because it provides a revealing contrast to how Signalgate is being treated. In Trump's case, the FBI and DOJ went to great lengths to retrieve the classified files. Trump was indicted on 37 counts in mid-2023 for willfully retaining national defense information and obstructing justice. The evidence included that notorious photo of the bathroom storage, as well as descriptions of Trump showing off a secret military document to guests in Bedminster and instructing aides to hide boxes. It was a serious case under the Espionage Act. However, something extraordinary happened. The case essentially fell apart thanks to Judge Eileen Cannon. Judge Cannon, a Trump-appointed federal judge in Florida, had already raised eyebrows in 2022 by intervening favorably for Trump, ordering a special master to slow down the FBI's review of seized documents, a move later overturned on appeal. Cannon's court slow-walked the proceedings, and Trump's legal team challenged special counsel Jack Smith's authority. In a controversial decision, Judge Cannon dismissed the entire classified documents case in early 2025. Agreeing with Trump's lawyers that Smith's appointment by the DOJ was improper. The dismissal order didn't refute the evidence of Trump's document hoarding. Instead, it was an example of a highly partisan move that Jack Smith was preparing to appeal until Trump ended up winning the election. This is particularly notable to me because Trump complains constantly that federal judges ruling against him are activist judges, but here we had perhaps the most profound case of a potential activist judge in history. This resulted in Trump being legally off the hook for his stash of secret nuclear and military documents in his bathroom. Trump, of course, declared it a victory and blasted the whole investigation as a witch hunt finally being quashed. For Trump and his allies, the narrative became, see, we told you it was bogus, even the judge threw it out. Never mind that many legal experts found Cannon's reasoning specious and inconsistent with precedent. To put it satirically, it turns out having friends in high places, or high benches, can be as valuable as a secure safe. Now let's compare this to Signalgate. In Signalgate, we have current officials in Trump's new administration actively leaking plans in real time. Did any Republicans call for Hegseth or Waltz to be criminally charged for the breach? Thus far, no. In fact, Trump and the White House tried to assure everyone it wasn't a big deal. The irony here is rich. Trump himself howled about Hillary Clinton's emails in 2016, leading to lock her up chants, because she might have mishandled classified information. Yet here, when he and his own team literally did mishandle classified info, allegedly, the outrage from their side was muted. Let's not forget, during the 2016 campaign and beyond, Republicans hammered Hillary Clinton for using a private email server as Secretary of State. They accused her of potentially exposing secrets, even though an FBI investigation would later find no deliberate leaks and no charges ended up being filed. Trump repeatedly said Hillary deserved jail. Pete Hegseth himself, then a Fox News commenter, said, "If it was anyone other than Hillary, they'd be in jail right now. If you're using unclassified means for sensitive information, there's a potential that foreign governments are reading it." Now fast forward to 2025. Hegseth is caught doing exactly what he warned about, using an unsecured channel for possible top secret information dissemination. Yet he insists it's fine. He's not volunteering to put himself in jail. So that brings me to the next comparison, Hillary's emails versus Signalgate and the double standard on display. To recap the Clinton email saga briefly, Hillary used a personal email server for work during her tenure as Secretary of State. Some classified information ended up on that server, mostly retroactively classified or at the confidential level. In 2016, then FBI Director James Comey famously found Clinton had been extremely careless. But there was no evidence of intentional mishandling, and no charges were brought. Crucially, no evidence emerged that her emails were hacked or leaked to adversaries. Still, Republicans treated it as the scandal of the century, chanting "lock her up" at rallies, insisting that merely creating that potential for risk was a crime, deserving of prison. Now look at Signalgate in 2025. Here we have an actual leak of real war plans to an unauthorized person, the journalist, and further willful dissemination to people entirely outside of the government, Hegseth's friends and family. This is a far more concrete breach of national security than Hillary's email setup ever was. As Senator Chris Coons noted, the Signal fiasco involved officials committing what should be prosecutable offenses. And yet, do we hear any lock him up chants on the right aimed at Hegseth or Waltz or anyone else? No. The reaction from Republicans has largely been silence or shrugging. In some cases, it's even been defensive, attacking the journalist rather than the leakers. Hegseth publicly called Goldberg a deceitful, highly discredited so-called journalist who peddles hoaxes, essentially trying to shoot the messenger. Other Trump allies tried to claim the real outrage was that The Atlantic dared to publish these secrets, not that Trump's team leaked them in the first place. The disparity didn't go unnoticed. Observers across the political spectrum pointed out the hypocrisy. A former Clinton staffer wrote that Signalgate was stunning in its hypocrisy, because those who yelled about Clinton's emails were now minimizing their own, much more egregious, allegedly, security breach. Even Clinton herself commented, with no small amount of bitterness, that if it weren't for double standards, well, Republicans wouldn't have standards at all. Let me highlight a specific example of this double standard. Mike Waltz, the national security advisor who added Goldberg by mistake. Today, Waltz says, "We made a mistake. We're moving forward." And he downplays the leak. But back in 2023, Waltz was publicly complaining on Twitter that it was unfair for Trump to be indicted over classified documents, while Hillary deleted 33,000 emails on her server. He implied Hillary deserved punishment. Yet now in 2025, his own mistake actually exposed classified information, and he expects a pass. Or consider Pete Hegseth. In 2016 on Fox News, Hegseth said Clinton's handling was so reckless, and anyone else would be jailed. But in 2025, well, he claims his Signal chats with actual war plans were just informal and fine. The Republican outrage machine that was so loud about Clinton has been conspicuously quiet about Signalgate. No one at Trump's rallies is chanting "lock up J.D. Vance" or Marco Rubio or Tulsi Gabbard. And obviously none of the actual officials in Signalgate have faced any charges to date. Trump certainly isn't going to order his DOJ to start investigating his own people. This is where we should talk about how differently high-ranking officials versus us regular folks get treated when mishandling classified information. As someone who held a top-secret SCI clearance, I can tell you, the rules and regulations are drilled into every clearance holder. You're told that mishandling classified information can and will derail your career, and possibly land you in jail. And indeed, for many of the rank-and-file military and intelligence personnel, that's exactly what happens if they break the rules. For example, in 2023, Airman Jack Teixeira, an Air National Guard member, leaked classified intel about the Ukraine war on a Discord server to impress his online buddies. He was swiftly caught, prosecuted, and in 2025 was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his actions. Reality Winner, an NSA contractor, leaked a single document in 2017 about Russian election interference. She got 5 years in prison. Chelsea Manning leaked a trove of documents and got a 35-year sentence, which Obama would later commute after 7 years. There's also the case of Navy sailor Christian Saucier, who in 2009 took photos inside a nuclear submarine, relatively low-level classified info. He was prosecuted and spent a year in prison and 3 years on supervised release. The point is, lower-level personnel are routinely punished harshly for even minor breaches. Now consider Signalgate's players. Waltz, Hegseth, Vance. These are high-ranking officials, close to the president. Do we think they'll face criminal charges under the Espionage Act or be sent to prison? Well, almost certainly not. They might face some internal discipline, or at worst lose their positions if political pressure were to mount, but history shows that powerful officials often evade the kind of punishment that would befall an enlisted service member or junior analyst. There's a telling quote in the Washington Post from a few years back. "There's a double standard. The more senior you are, the less chance you pay a heavy penalty," said a former intel officer. That still rings true. Let's drive it home with a quote from someone intimately familiar with military justice. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Van Landingham, a former Air Force lawyer, reacted to Hegseth's leak by saying, "If this was someone on active duty, their career would be completely over and they'd be facing jail time, most likely just for using the wrong system, never mind the recklessness." She added that individuals get administrative punishment at a minimum for leaving classified info on their desk. So imagine how serious texting war plans would be. Another military judge commented, "Oh, I'd be court-martialed for that," when hearing of Hegseth's behavior. I should note here that some workspaces are cleared for open storage. Where I worked, we routinely had classified information stored in the open, but it was information we needed immediate access to in case of emergency. And our workspace was behind locked doors, so it was essentially a safe in itself. Our non-emergent classified information was locked in actual safes and inventoried routinely. But I just wanted to add that context here that in some situations it is okay to have open storage and to have to sanitize that classified if someone that isn't cleared is given access to the room. For a little more context, when Colonel Van Landingham refers to the wrong system, she's almost certainly referring to the NIPRNet versus SIPRNet. The NIPRNet can be thought of as the open, normal internet. The SIPRNet can be thought of as the classified internet. It's not connected to the NIPRNet, and it's the medium through which confidential or secret information is transmitted. So when these officials are using Signal on their phones, well, they're transmitting classified information through an unclassified system. That's why it's problematic. Even though Signal itself is encrypted, it's not on the SIPRNet. Anyway, the double standard is glaring. David Petraeus, a four-star general and former CIA director, shared classified notebooks with his biographer/mistress. He got off with probation and a fine. But an E-3 airman leaked something? He's locked up for a decade or more. In Signalgate, we have multiple high officials arguably violating 18 U.S.C. Section 793, part of the Espionage Act, which criminalizes mishandling defense information, and also possibly 18 U.S.C. Section 798 as well. More on that in a second. If they were junior officers, I suspect they'd already be in an orange jumpsuit awaiting trial. But as of now, none have lost their jobs. In fact, Trump publicly said he felt very comfortable with what occurred, and called Goldberg a sleazebag for exposing it. The lack of accountability at the top stands in stark contrast to the rigid enforcement lower down. This isn't to say powerful people never face consequences, but it is rarer, and often penalties are far lighter. And this sends a demoralizing message to the troops and career officials. If you're important enough, the rules don't apply the same way. And that, in turn, can breed the kind of lax attitude that leads to fiascos like Signalgate in the first place. Let's take a quick step back from the drama and do a short primer on classified information. What do terms like top secret really mean? And what laws govern the handling of classified material, such that people like Senator Coons say a crime was committed? In the US, classified info is divided into three main levels: confidential, secret, and top secret, often abbreviated as C, S, and TS. The level is supposed to reflect the potential damage to national security that could happen if the information were disclosed without authorization. In a nutshell, confidential is the lowest level. This is information that could cause damage to national security if leaked. Secret is mid-level. This is information that could cause serious damage to national security if disclosed. This could include things like military operational plans or intelligence assessments. Most classified info that I've seen is secret. Top secret is the highest level. This is information that could cause exceptionally grave damage to national security if exposed. Think things like high-level military plans, nuclear secrets, identities of spies, etc. Top secret information is very tightly controlled. Beyond these, you have compartments and code words, like SCI, sensitive compartmented information, which is often intelligence from sensitive sources, or SAP, special access programs for the most sensitive projects. This is like putting an additional requirement on top secret so only a very select group can access it. Not only was some of the information Trump openly stored at his resort top secret, allegedly, but it was compartmented. Let's briefly recall Clinton's emails. You may remember seeing paragraphs with a C in parentheses at the start. Those are portion markings denoting the level of classification of a paragraph. A document can have multiple classifications on one page. For instance, the overall level could be secret, stamped in the top and bottom of the page in red. Portion markings will note which content is secret, along with any other content that could be confidential or unclassified. So a page could be classified as secret simply because of a word or a phrase in one paragraph. So those portion markings were hints that those paragraphs were classified at the confidential level. Now, the signal chat we've been discussing, details of an upcoming military strike, would almost certainly be classified at least secret, if not top secret. Why? Well, because if the enemy got that info ahead of time, it could cause grave damage or exceptionally grave damage. Failed missions, killed troops, etc. So when Hegseth texted that over Signal to people he knew lacked a clearance, he was in effect, allegedly, transmitting classified info in an unauthorized manner to unauthorized recipients. That's where the laws come in. The handling of classified material is governed by a combination of executive orders, which set classification rules, and federal statutes, which criminalize certain types of disclosures. The big one is often referred to as the Espionage Act. Despite its name, you don't have to be a spy selling secrets to a foreign power to violate it. It broadly covers unauthorized retention and transmission of national defense information. If you willfully transmit such information to someone not entitled to have it, well, you've broken the law. This is the law under which people like Reality Winner, Chelsea Manning, Jack Teixeira, and yes, Donald Trump in the Mar-a-Lago docs case were charged. Penalties can be severe. Each count can carry up to 10 years in prison. Another relevant law is 18 U.S.C. section 798, which specifically criminalizes unauthorized disclosure of classified information related to communications intelligence. This one is very on point for things like signals, intercepts, code breaking, or information about secure communications. If, for instance, any of the info in the signal chat pertained to U.S. communications monitoring or codes, say, for example, if someone revealed we intercepted Houthi communications, Section 798 would apply. It's a felony to disclose such information to an unauthorized person. Notably, 798 was written to be pretty strict. There's no requirement of intent to harm. Just knowingly sharing the classified COMINTEL is enough. It was passed in 1950 after some high-profile leaks, and it's one of the more clear-cut criminal statutes on leaking. So when Senator Warren said the use of Signal for war plans was blatantly illegal, I think she had these statutes in mind. And when Senator Coons said they all committed a crime that would normally mean jail, he's thinking if these were anyone other than the president's top people, they could be prosecuted under the Espionage Act or related laws and quite possibly convicted. One more law to mention, 18 U.S.C. section 1924, which makes it a crime for a government official to knowingly remove classified documents without authority. This is the law that people like Sandy Berger and Trump's aide Walt Nauta have been charged under. It's a lesser offense than espionage, focused just on taking and keeping classified documents. In Signalgate, no physical documents were taken, but electronic transmission of classified information without authority is arguably worse, especially when knowingly transmitted to family and friends just for funsies. Now here's the kicker. The president, and by extension those that he authorizes, does have unique authority. As president, Trump could try to argue anything he did was declassification or authorized disclosure. For example, when Trump himself blurted out sensitive information to Russian officials in an Oval Office meeting in 2017, he can shield himself by saying a president can declassify or authorize any sharing at will. But Hegseth and Waltz don't have that immunity. They can't wave a wand and declassify information on the fly. The group chat leak doesn't appear to have been authorized by the president. By all accounts, Trump had no knowledge of it in advance. So they were flying without a legal safety net. Also, I'd like to touch here on Trump's notion that he can declassify things just by thinking about it. I think that's a significant stretch, and that it could, stress could, be proven in court that his authority doesn't work in that manner. In summary, Signalgate likely involved violations of classification rules and possibly federal law, the kind of violations that have landed others in prison. And yet, as we've discussed, it's uncertain if anyone will truly be held accountable due to who the culprits are. One recurring thought in the aftermath of Signalgate is how incredibly lucky the United States got given the circumstances. Think about it. National Security Advisor Waltz intended to add NSC spokesman Brian Hughes to that Signal chat, but he accidentally added Jeffrey Goldberg. Now, Goldberg is an American journalist with a sense of duty, so when he realized what he was looking at, he didn't leak it to a foreign power or use it for personal gain. He reported it through proper journalistic channels after the operation took place, even redacting sensitive parts initially. In other words, the leak stopped with Goldberg's responsible handling. But imagine if Waltz's mistake had been different. What if instead of Goldberg's number, he'd added accidentally, say, a phone number belonging to a foreign intelligence operative or a hacker? It's not as far-fetched as it may sound. Hostile intelligence services constantly target U.S. officials, and if any one of those officials had a compromise in their contacts, a similar slip-up could have invited an enemy eavesdropper. If a Russian or Chinese agent had been the unexpected guest in the Signal chat, they would have had real-time knowledge of an impending U.S. attack. They could have warned the Houthi targets. They could have blown the operation, costing American lives, or letting high-value targets escape. The consequences could have been catastrophic. Likewise, Hegseth's second Signal chat could have been an even bigger nightmare. He added his wife, brother, and lawyer, none of whom are trained in secure communications. What if one of them lost their phone, or had malware on it? Suddenly those Yemen strike details, well, they could be floating around unencrypted or accessible to adversaries. The fact that this didn't result in a worse breach is sheer luck. As a former security professional, I'd say our leaders dodged a bullet, or perhaps a dozen of missiles here. So this scandal shines a glaring light on broader problems with communication security and accountability at the highest levels. It suggests that some senior officials either don't understand the gravity of proper secure communications or just don't think the rules apply to them. Maybe they found the Pentagon's secure systems too cumbersome or slow, so they resorted to Signal for convenience. Maybe they valued secrecy from leaks so much that they created a tiny chat circle, ironically creating a worse leak risk. And perhaps they never imagined one wrong number would expose it all. Signalgate could be a case study in why we have protocols and why even VIPs need to follow the rules. It's all too easy to say, oh, it's fine, it's just our team here, until it isn't. The Signal scandal revealed inadequate safeguards. Why was one person able to add members without a second check? Why weren't all participants of such a chat positively verified? In military operations, we practice need to know for information dissemination. That completely broke down here. It also reveals a lack of accountability. If lower-ranking folks know they'd get slammed for such behavior but see higher-ups skate by, it breeds cynicism and lowers morale. Signalgate has prompted calls not just for investigations but reforms. There have been discussions about tightening rules on using unofficial apps for official business, something already generally frowned upon. Remember, Trump officials previously got in trouble for using apps like WhatsApp for government work, but it's clearly not enforced here. Another reflection is the role of personal devices and apps. In this digital age, it's tempting for officials to use their smartphones and favorite apps to communicate, instead of clunky secure phones or SCIFs. But Signalgate is a dramatic illustration of why consumer apps are not a substitute for secure communications when it comes to classified information. Even though Signal's encrypted, using it for government secrets is against policy. It's not monitored, it's not archived, it's not on the SIPRNet, and as we saw, it's prone to user error. A moment of inattention by Waltz led to a worst-case scenario, yet one that could have been even worse if not for Goldberg's integrity. I think we should thank Jeffrey Goldberg for how he handled this. He immediately recognized the sensitivity and didn't go publishing everything right away. He consulted with his editorial team. They reached out to the government, which is how the NSC ended up confirming the chat's authenticity. They redacted the name of the CIA operative and the exact timing of the strikes. They behaved like responsible journalists, balancing public interest with national security. Goldberg even said he believed the public interest was served by exposing the issue, meaning it was important for the world to know that such a breach could occur. If a hostile actor was in his shoes, we'd be having a very different conversation right now, possibly recounting a failed mission or even worse. As I wrap up this deep dive into Signalgate, well, what are the big takeaways? First, even the highest level officials are capable of astonishing lapses in judgment. Titles and rank don't guarantee wisdom. In this case, a vice president, a defense secretary, and others acted in ways that if I'd done similarly in the Air Force, it would have ended my career and possibly even put me behind bars. Second, we see that accountability in Washington can be highly selective. When it was politically convenient, some leaders demanded harsh punishment for classified mishandling. When it was Clinton, their opponent. But when the spotlight turned on them, those cries, they faded. This isn't to say mishandling secrets is a partisan issue. It shouldn't be. National security should absolutely be a nonpartisan concern. Yet the reactions to Signalgate versus prior cases show us that partisanship often biases the response. True integrity would mean applying the same standard across the board. If it was wrong for Clinton to risk exposure of classified information, even with no actual leak, then it's certainly wrong that Hegseth and others actually leaked classified information to unauthorized people. If one thinks Hillary deserved to lock her up, then by that logic, Hegseth and Waltz should be sharing a cell. Conversely, if one thought Hillary's issue was overblown, perhaps they'd try to minimize Signalgate, but that requires ignoring a much more direct breach that actually occurred. From my perspective as a veteran, the most disturbing part of this saga is the cavalier attitude it reveals. The US spends billions on intelligence and security, and we entrust our leaders with the crown jewels of our secrets. When I held a TS/SCI clearance, I felt the weight of that responsibility every day. It's disheartening to see people at the top treating that responsibility so lightly, essentially texting like teenagers about something as important as war plans. We were fortunate this breach didn't cost lives, but it certainly lost us some credibility. There's no doubt allies saw this and were appalled, and adversaries likely saw it and were amused, or maybe even encouraged to think that lapses in the highest level could hand them an advantage next time. In fact, I would imagine this could lead to foreign agents starting a hacking campaign on the nearest and dearest of every high-ranking official just because of the slim chance maybe they were told classified info for funsies. The hope here is that Signalgate serves as a wake-up call that secure channels must be used, and that classification rules matter, and that leaders must be held to the same standards as everyone else. Whether that actually happens, we'll see. As of this video, the Pentagon and Congress are investigating, and there are calls for at least a slap on the wrist for those involved. But it may be that the ultimate accountability comes from public opinion. Scandals like this can tarnish reputations and legacies. One more thing, Signalgate is a reminder of the value of a free press. If Goldberg hadn't revealed this, we might never know it happened. The administration initially wasn't going to tell the world, oh, by the way, we accidentally leaked our own war plans. It's because of investigative journalism that the public and Congress were alerted, and now hopefully reforms can be made. In the end, Signalgate sits at the messy interaction of national security and politics. It's a tale of human error, hubris, and hypocrisy. It's both frightening and darkly comic that a group text nearly breached a war plan. Serious in substance, yet satirical in the spectacle of it all. You almost couldn't script a political farce this rich. But it's real, and the implications are real. When Pete Hegseth was nominated to be SecDef, I knew he was unqualified, and this scandal just reinforces that thought. Here he was texting his wife, and brother, and lawyer classified information, just like Jack Teixeira did in Discord, so he could look cool and important. As a former airman who held a clearance, my final reflection is this: we must demand better from our leaders. The trust we place in them is immense. When they fumble that trust, the stakes are too high to just shrug it off. Signalgate should go down in history not just as an embarrassing story, but as a turning point that forced some much-needed changes in how our top brass handle the nation's secrets. Thanks for watching and listening to this deep dive. Let's hope we don't see a Signal Leak Part 3 anytime soon, but if we do, I'll be sure to cover it here. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about how this scandal was handled? Should there be prosecutions, resignations, or is it being blown out of proportion? I'm curious to hear your perspectives. Thanks for watching Valor and Hope. If you found this content valuable, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who want to make a difference. Remember, the fight for justice is never over, but together, we can keep pushing forward. Stay strong, stay hopeful. I'll see you in the next video.